Hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space and another Halloween video for my 2025 Halloween card series. As always, I'll have a link to that playlist in the end screen at the very end of the video for you to check out, and I'll keep adding to it as I make and post Halloween cards. For today's card, I'm using several of the new goodies from the Simon Says Stamp September 1st Stamptember release. As of filming this intro, I already think a couple items are out of stock, but they will restock those items, so no worries there. And yeah, inky, splattery, die cut goodness. I had a lot of fun. As always, everything I used will be listed and linked in the description box below the video. My links are affiliate links. That just means that if you click on one of my links and end up placing an order, I do get a little kickback from that at no extra cost to you. It's what helps pay the bills, keeps the lights on, enables me to keep bringing out content. And yeah, let's get into making this card. So first off, I found my Tim Holtz Moon Mask stencils. Hooray! I mentioned in an earlier video in this series that I couldn't find them, but then I did. So all is right in the world. So I took one of the masks, the smallest one, and I just used a little bit of adhesive to hold it in place. This is Distress watercolor paper, and I am ink blending Distress inks onto this, and I am not doing a nice blend. I ain't worried about it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be a smooth blend because we're going to be spraying water and splattering and adding die cuts and, just have fun with it. Any water reactive ink or spray, whatever, will work for this. This sort of technique, I just started calling like the Spooky Skies technique, and as always, full credit for this goes to Stacey Hutchinson. I have an entire playlist of doing these types of backgrounds in all different ways, and I will link to that playlist at the end. Because I've done it with sprays, inks, all sorts of things. So I'm working my way around and blending these inks, and I went with Kitsch Flamingo and Seedless Preserves, Peacock Feathers, and then I will add peeled paint along the bottom. And it definitely needs to be something that's water reactive. Distress inks are like the most water reactive, same with like oxides or distress spray stains or oxide sprays. But again, you can experiment with what you got, So added my ink, and this looks like a pile of hot garbage right now. There's always a method to the madness. So I removed the mask, and I just used my little adhesive eraser to remove the teensy little bit of adhesive that was left over. And then I'm going to spray basically where that moon is with water. And because these inks are water reactive, you saw how they just immediately started pulling the ink into it. And that's what creates like your spooky sky. So you could leave it here. I end up putting the mask over it again so I can just spray more water to get that speckly look. Because again, distress inks, especially on top of distress watercolor paper like this, are insanely reactive. So I sprayed with water, pressed in paper towel. That's where you get all the speckly bits. And then I'm going to just dry this with a heat tool. You could leave it as this, add more, do whatever you want. I decided to use the actual little moon stencil with this. And I'm using antique linen ink. However, this brush had a lot of brown ink in it. Again, I just went with it. I was like, you know what? I'm fine with it. Sometimes it's kind of fun to just embrace the randomness of it all. So I blended that on there. And then I pulled out the CZ Design Halloween Basics set. This is the one that right now as I'm doing this voiceover, completely out of stock. But it is getting restocked. They will get it back because they must. They must. It's one, CZ Design, and two, look at this. It's so good. And the sentiments. So I lined up this bat stamp, and I'm stamping that over top of this with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. Love. And then I die cut it with one of the Postage rectangles wafer dies. I'm quickly becoming obsessed with those dies. I'm going to be using them a lot. Just heads up on that. So I set that all aside. And then I used the Twisted Tree Arch wafer dies. Oh, love. Anyway, I die cut it from Nina Desert Storm cardstock. And I left the dye in the cardstock here because I wanted to just add a bunch of ink. And when you're dealing with what I call finicky dyes, like, you know, there's all those little delicate bits on this one of the branches. And this applies to, like, you know, very fine sentiments. Anything with those little tiny bits that will easily curl or rip off if you want to do ink blending, I leave it in the cardstock. That way it's holding all those pieces in place and I can slap ink on it and I'm not worried about it. So I added the antique linen and I'm also adding vintage photo and just, again, literally just slapping ink on it just to build up a bit of depth and color to this die cut piece. And then after I had done this, I was like, it needs more texture, you know? So I popped it out of its cardstock prison. I popped it out of there, and then I'm going to add some white splatter using the Simon Says Stamp Positively Perfect white splatter. And I could have left it just like this, but I was also like mucking around and playing. So I could have just left it like this and let it fully dry. But instead, what I did was after I added the splatter and it's still very wet, I'm going to pull this out of here and I'm going to press that paper towel to it as well. So that's going to lighten it up significantly. But it was kind of interesting how it, see how it just made that texture, you know? Why not? So I did that and I set it aside. We'll come back to that in a second. I took a scrap of distressed watercolor paper and I'm blending on those same inks that I'd used for the background. So the Kitsch Flamingo, Seedless Preserves, the Peacock Feathers, and then I will add some of the peeled paint. And not worried about a blend, anything. We're going to die cut this anyway. But I added those inks and then I'm going to also spray this with water because that's always where distress inks and oxides shine is when you add water. It's fun. So I sprayed on the water and then I just, after I did this, this is where I added the peeled paint. And I really like, because there was water on that remaining bit of cardstock, like that I'd soaked up, but it was there. And I really like how that ink picked it up right there. I got to keep that in the back of my mind. I was like, oh, I need to play with that a little more down the road. Because like I love spraying the water and picking it up, but spraying it first, you get those darker splotches because it obviously grabs the ink. Anyway, like I said, I will be revisiting that down the road. It was just another one of those random little things that kind of made me go, huh. So those pieces I die cut with the leaves, which is a separate little wafer die in that twisted tree arch. And we'll get to those. And then the arch itself, I die cut black pieces of cardstock. Originally, I was going to do this in black. And then I changed my mind and did the craft cardstock instead and the ink blending. And I could have saved these die cuts, you know, for a future project. But instead, I layered them together to stack and add dimension to this tree. Because definitely one like this, I could have just put like foam squares on the back of the tree itself. I definitely wouldn't have like worried about those branches. But yeah, sometimes I like being a little extra fiddly like this. And while it looks like I'm adding a lot of glue, I'm really not. It's very thin. I'm not too concerned about it. But yeah, stack these layers together to build that dimension, you know? Because this tree is just, I love it. I love it. The detail of it. One of my favorites from this release. So, got all my layers stacked together. And then I'm going to adhere this to that background. And it does cover up a lot of the background, the bats. I'm okay with that. You know, this more than anything, this was just kind of a lot of experimenting, you know, and a lot of just, I wonder. So I adhered that to the background, put my magnets on top of it just to hold it down, let the glue dry, and then those leaves. So I just ran that little leaf die with that piece that I had added all the ink blending to, and I also die cut a couple scraps of black cardstock, and then I just started gluing them on. And I'm just going to super speed this up because I just kind of sat and played for a bit. You know, I had a video going and just started adhering a bunch of these little leaves. And the fun thing with this is depending on, you know, what you're making and depending on your color scheme, you know, it's going to look different. So you could do the leaves in like fall colors. That would look really, really pretty. Could do them, you know, you could just, the sky's the limit. The sky's the limit. I love it. So I just kept working my way around. I would kind of layer some of the leaves with the black die cut leaves, and then some I would just stick down as is, reverse tweezers for the win to hold some of these in place, and then just pop on some glue and stick them into place. And yeah, this ended up building a lot of dimension, a lot of texture, and I still had a lot of leaves left over, which I end up using. I use more of them on the inside at the very end. So kept working my way around. Like I said, super sped this up, but I kind of kept the colors too similar to where the colors were on the background. So there was a bit of intention there. So I did, the pinks more where the pinks showed up in the background, the purples. But again, at the same time, it doesn't need to be exact. This was all just fun. So kept working my way around until I was happy with the amount of leaves I'd placed. And like I said, I ended up with several extras left over. So once I've got all of these, I also used the Haunted Pumpkin wafer die set. I love it. It's so cute. It's so cute. So I die cut the pumpkin from another scrap of distress watercolor paper. And then I blended the vintage photo onto the stem of it. This is the piece that forms the back or the inside of the pumpkin. So added the vintage photo, and then I used black soot onto the base of this. And then for the actual pumpkin, I'm going to use the Seedless Preserves and Kitsch Flamingo, just to again keep the color combo, somewhat consistent. And then once I've got the colors blended onto this, I'm just going to adhere them together. Another option would be to use like the glow-in-the-dark embossing powder, which I did earlier in the series, like use that on the base so that the eyes and mouth like glow in the dark. It is another option. Would be super cute. I was more focused on like splatter and texture for this one. So blended all of these little pieces together. Off camera, I did spray a bit of water on this as well. It's just not super obvious, but I also am going to do like a bunch of splatter on this, so it's whatever. So after I was done my ink blending, I adhered these pieces together with my liquid glue, and then I'm going to pop this onto the background of this card in a second. I also am going to do all of the little hats that are part of this die set. I can't. They're so cute. So there's this little toque, and I said this when I did the release and review live at the beginning of this month. That is a toque. That is what we Canadians call it. It's not a beanie, it's a toque. Thank you for coming to my mini TED Talk. Anyway, use the same colors. So the toque got the Kitsch Flamingo, and then the one little witch's hat got the peacock feathers, the other one got the peeled paint. And then I just took a Copic marker and colored the little bands, because there's like piercing detail that, shows where the hat bands are. And I just used a marker to fill those in and color them black. So got those colored in, and then cleaned up my mess, because I had ink everywhere, splatter everywhere, all the things. This was a fun little crafty session. So adhered the little band to that little toque, and then I'll set those aside. We will come back to them in a minute. So got the pumpkin into place on my background, and then the background I adhered to my card base. And my card base is a top folding A2 black note card, so 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And I got those adhered together because I want to add white splatter, and I wanted some white splatter on that black card base as well. So I got all that adhered, and then I stuck this in my splat box, and then I'm going to add white splatter, and then I'm going to add black splatter. So I'm just going to use my gouache for this. I could have used that Simon's Positive Perfect white splatter. Could I use it for this? But by this point, I couldn't find it. What else is new? Honestly. Really. Anyway, added white splatter heavily all over this thing. Just went to town with it. And then I'll do the black splatter, because Halloween card, it doesn't even matter. Honestly, it doesn't matter. But that's one of the reasons why I like making Halloween cards so much, is you can just make it as messy as you want. Have fun with it. Just literally embrace the chaos, y'all. So added black splatter. So with both of these gouaches, when I add them to my palette, I add a bit of water to thin it out, and then add my splatter. And just always keep in mind this black wash is insanely pigmented and it will stain everything in sight. Totally worth it. Absolutely love it. So I added all my splattery bits to this card front and then cleaned off my palette, cleaned out my brush, set everything aside. The little ghosties, I just die cut from scraps of white cardstock. And you could just pop the eyes out. That sounds so horrible, but you could just pop them out and leave them. Like, they're cute. They're little ghosties. Who cares? And I was going to do that, but then I was like, nope, I want them in place. So I've shown this in many ways over the years, but yeah, I just take a piece of washi tape, just low tack tape. And you saw I just pressed it to the back of that little die cut. It picked up both those eyes. And then I colored them in with that same just black Copic marker. Any black marker would work. And then I can just quickly pop that right back into place. And simple, saves me from having to like die cut scraps of black cardstock, and fiddle and whatever. So I just kept repeating that. Pressed the washi tape to the back of the die cut to get the eyes in place, popped them out, colored them with the black marker, fit them right back in, pressed down the tape really well, and then when I go to adhere these to the card, I put a like foam square on the back of that will hold the tape in place, fully, and they're good to go. So after I did their little eyes, then I glued on their little hats. And again, you could leave off the hats, if you just want to have just the ghosties as is. I always like those options. But they needed their accessories because who doesn't want accessories? And they're so ridiculously cute. I absolutely love it. So I let that glue dry, and then to adhere them to this card, I was popping them up with foam squares to, again, just build up that little bit of dimension. And the foam squares also, like I said, hold that bit of washi tape in place as well. So got those popped into place. And then I used the literally little boo wafer die. I just die cut the word from white cardstock, the outline from black, adhered together. Simple. I popped that into place. And then I ended up stamping a little sentiment from that Halloween Basics set. And I die cut it with one of the new Sentiment Labels 2.0 wafer dies. So I'd stamped it onto a scrap white cardstock, die cut it with that label die, and then this I'm going to pop right under that little boo sentiment. It's like, boo, stay spooky. Love it. So got that stamped, and then I die cut just a panel of white cardstock with that same A2 Postage rectangle wafer die. And then I lined up that bat stamp again, and I stamped that with Simon's Ballerina Positively Saturated ink, just really light. Just a light pink ink, so it's easy to write over. And then I took a sentiment, the Happy Halloween sentiment from that same stamp set, lined that up, and I'm going to stamp that with the VersaFine Claire Nocturne ink. And then after I'd stamped that, I adhered it to the inside of the card, and it was an afterthought, so I didn't film this, but I'll show it at the end. I took a bunch of those extra die-cut leaves that I had and adhered them to the inside as well, just because. You could leave it off, but I thought, why not? So once that was adhered, this card's complete. And like I said, texture and dimension and splatter and yeah, and a fun color combo, It was fun. So, like I mentioned in the intro, the links to all the things are in the description box below the video. The 2 playlists I mentioned, those will be linked in the end screen at the very end if you want to check them out. Thank you all so very much for hanging out with me, for thumbs upping and commenting. Subscribe if you haven't. I would love to have you. And I will be seeing you all very soon in the next video. Bye. Thank you so much to my amazing Patreon supporters. For anyone that might be interested in joining my Patreon community and supporting me, the link to my Patreon is in the description box below the video. For everyone else, as always, thank you all so much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't, I'd love to have you. And here's a couple other videos for you to check out in case you missed them. Bye!